My love, my love, said the strangest thing. Lay with me beneath the sycamore fallen tree. For 1,000 branches they cannot cross. Lay with me beneath the sycamore fallen tree. Oh, so beautiful to see. All right, anyways, that one's in the works. Anyways, gave up that career for photography. Oh, that little look. That's what you're doing? So when I was 9 years old, I walked into this little store, little corner store, and there was this plastic camera on the shelf. And I stared at that camera for months. I begged my mom for it. I wanted it so bad. It was like probably $5, but for whatever reason, I guess she just felt it wasn't the right thing being 9 years old. And that memory never left me. And it wasn't until I was 17 years old that I took up photography, and I had dropped out of school, so I have grade 10 and a half education. That's my schooling.
Good. Love it.
The last time I seriously shot film, I can't even remember. It was years ago. You know, I still will occasionally just put a roll of Tri-X in my Leica and expose it. I mean, when digital first started sort of coming up in photography, you know, there was a lot of talk about, oh, you know, it'll never happen, blah, blah, blah. Film is always here to stay and all that kind of stuff. And then when it became apparent that working digitally is going to be common and is going to stay with us, there was this profound sense of loss, that things will never be the same. It was a change that could never be reversed. That, for me personally, triggered at the very least a lot of anxiety, but there was a sense of mourning, that there's things that I loved. You know, my cameras, the films I was used to, all those things were a part of me. They were my tools. They were my paints and my brushes, right? And I couldn't have them any longer. There was all kinds of things that I went through. Mourning, anger. You know, it was a death. It really was. It was like, I think, akin to all those things one feels when they lose something dear in their lives, or someone dear in their lives. I'm just tired of worrying. I'm really actually incredibly excited with all the potential of what digital offers. Do you want me to shut up for a while?
No, I like where we're going with this.
It was pretty clear in the days of analog that the Holy Grail was a beautiful print. You know, whether that gets scanned and reproduced in a magazine or put in a book or hung in a gallery, that was the ultimate form of the photograph. So, first of all, who cares about the print now, right? If you're working in a commercial context, you don't need to make a print. Now you need to make it look good on, you know, on a screen, on your iPad, on your desktop.
I was a very good illustrator. I could draw and illustrate people. So I got a job with a magazine, and I was doing this cover for them. An entire illustration took me 60 hours, just about. And then an assignment came along, and they didn't have a photographer. So they asked me, they're like, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I know how to work a camera, no problem, right? So I took it, and it was. I remember it was a Pentax Spotmatic. Do you remember that camera? A classic. All it was manual. That's all, just manual. So you really had to know how to work it, how everything worked. And I went out and shot the assignment and then, you know, saw the results from the lab, and that was it. I'm like, okay, I can illustrate for 40, 60 hours, or I can just snap at 1/25th of a second. And especially when I realized some of these shutter speeds back then they weren't like now. I think some shutters are 1/10,000th of a second. So what that really means, you could have 10,000 images up on the wall, and the entire time that it took to expose those was 1 second. Doesn't that blow you away? Or you could spend 60 hours illustrating. So that was a big turnaround for me. Now go down. I think the greatest thing that happened moving into my first real official studio that was functioning professionally was the shared situation. There were 3 photographers, and we all did different lighting. You know, there was bouncing off the ceilings, there was ring lights. Not being formally educated in lighting, what this did for me is it made it concrete. Suddenly I went, okay, I am doing things right, and I, you know, okay, you can bounce lights and do a little fill, and yeah, you can expose the background, you know, a stop and it won't hurt, and blah, 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 blah. It started off with product, and I was doing portraits and making really, really, really good money. This was back in the days in the 80s, late 80s, when you could make, fees were really good. Silly amounts of things. Photographers were rock stars, you know, quite a different day. And we picked up clientele. We were shooting everything, but it was all commercial work. We were shooting Eaton, Sears, Flair magazine, Chatelaine, Elle, like everything. Because we were new and young, people were coming to us. We had a dark room in our studio, so we were able to do processing. After a few years of this, I just started getting very cantankerous, and it wasn't the, you know, I was back to making money, but I wasn't happy, and it made no sense to me. So that's sort of at that point, that's when I changed another change in my career. I went into a conceptual photography. This was all done for a documentary for vampires. That was a great gig for me. And it was really, really, really the big bite into conceptual photography. So this is the opening door. From here, I've been slowly getting clients, bookings around this kind of work, including music work. Andrew Stetson for Bellow magazine, a wonderful gig. This is the guy that was the Calvin Klein campaign boy. But back to the vampire stuff, just wonderful, fun stuff that I got to play with skin tones how I wanted them. And of course, you know, play with the... Yeah, cool, huh? All these backgrounds, where are we? This little guy right here, my handy dandy, what can I say, I'm a Canon guy. It's been a good camera to me. Now that the big world of film's gone, I'm not using medium format anymore, not shooting with my Hasselblad, but all my backgrounds, I carry this around and I shoot all this stuff. And when we, you know, when we get back here, this was all, because it was winter, I couldn't shoot outside, so laid that in there. So what's interesting is this sort of goes into my music world. I just finished shooting Our Lady Peace. I'm faking high definition here by processing dark and processing light and contrasting and then brushing through the two. It's a poor man's version of high def. One of my favorite artists to shoot, Hawksley Workman. An extremely talented, great producer, great songwriter, and if you've ever seen him live, puts on an amazing show. We've had a few good, let's just say, sessions where the wine and the food comes out and it's a wonderful evening.
My new project, my new body of work is black and white portraits on a white background. That all came from an accounting of what it is that I loved about portraits. Simplicity, lack of context, hence the white background, because then the background always speaks to the person and their persona, right? And I wanted to eliminate that. I wanted to eliminate fashion. I wanted as much as possible to strip down the idea of the portraits just to its core. The lack of color. You know, all those things just sort of, to me, represent the core elements of a great picture. So these are some of the examples of my new body of work. Bruce McDonald. What can I tell you about Bruce? He's such a great subject. I mean, apart from having a great face to photograph, his persona is almost larger than life. And he's such a gentle and beautiful spirit. He so loves photography and images, and so he's completely like, oh, you should do one of this person, you should do one of this guy and this guy. And Bruce is my casting director in my new body of work, truly. I mean, he's brought me some amazing people to photograph. Sarah Lise MacArthur was one of the girls in his film. She's a native Canadian actress, model. She was so cool to photograph. Great character. Zion is one of Toronto's premier graffiti artists. And that's what he's known for, but he's like me, an amateur philosopher. And all-round cool guy. There's no propping, there's no wardrobe styling. I mean, this is Zion's shirt blowing around in the wind. So, I mean, I don't ask these people to come with a large wardrobe. We don't have a wardrobe stylist. And I mean, this shot here of Zion has his bag on his head as a hat. The way it feels for me is that it's almost the exact opposite of how I used to make portraits, in that when I worked with a large format camera, it was about building a picture and keeping people still and having them move to my direction. Whereas here, it's completely different. All of that is just thrown out the window, and in fact, I'm asking people to stop posing and stay in constant motion and just allow me to find the picture rather than to make the picture. That aspect of it is kind of invigorating in that, you know, it also challenges me to see, you know, is my eye still working well enough that I can see a beautiful image in a fraction of a second? Can I react that fast? Can I find it in that way? This is a continuing body of work, so I really haven't given myself a limit as to how many I will have. I mean, I'm just posting these on my new website as I make them. And some of them will have a non-linear component to them. Some of them will just remain as still shots. I think it's greatness and a beautiful mind. That's the thing that compels me to make portraits of people. I think it's more interesting now because I can explore that a lot more than I could with just a still image. You know, with motion and sound, I can actually get into the persona a lot deeper.
Hi, my name is Johnny Brower, and I'm on planet Earth to redistribute wealth.
I still haven't released myself in any way from the power of a great still image.
So I kind of jumped in to the deep end of the pool and had to swim quick.
You know, you got used to, you made a living out of it, you kind of had a grasp on it, you were masterful at it to some level. And then the rules completely change and you're playing a new game. But the good part about all that is that in the new game, if you allow yourself to release from the old game, the new game is much more interesting. You know, it's just filled with many, many more possibilities. In fact, it sort of requires you to think bigger.
Johnny, do you think there's a connection between drugs and creativity?
Oh, absolutely. And a very good one.
Yeah, keep looking at me. Don't curve away. Stay with me. It's been 30 years of shooting, and I'm guessing I'll do another 30. Well, huh? What's this mean? What? What's that mean? Oh, I'm fiddling. Sorry. Okay. Is it what I've learned or what I've learned not to do? To be a good photographer, you have to sort of be an ambassador of good choices, good taste. It's as much about having a verve and having a lust for food and an understanding of fashion. Even though I'm not a fashion person per se, I'm not the guy that will go out and, you know, really dress up in Versace or Gucci. You know, I'm always a mess on set and I rip up everything and dirty things up. So I downplay my clothing. But to have an understanding of what is, you know, the ultimate in fashion, what looks good, what is sexy, to enjoy and embrace beauty as much as grotesque and ugliness, I think is really important. 20 years ago, I was shooting commercial work because I wanted the money. But it wasn't giving me the body of work and the portfolio that I wanted. I was missing out on the art, and over the last few years, several years, four or 5 years, maybe a bit more, I've deconstructed that. I've cut off my commercial clients, the sort of catalog Sears and, you know, those things, and I've suffered. I'm rebuilding a clientele, but the conceptual work that I'm doing now is, instead of shooting every single day, it's more fine-tuned, and I'm shooting like beautiful work, you know, and it's going to be something I can retire with, because honestly, I don't think I'll stop shooting till I'm probably dead. Done. I'm falling over, which is a good thing, because one thing I can tell you about this business, if you're not shooting as a commercial photographer every day in a studio, it's pretty hard to save your money. You know, it's tough. It's the artists in us. Photographers 20 years ago, I don't think had to worry about this so much, but now it's a very strong thing, very key point to brand yourself as a photographer. You have to. You can't just be a guy that goes out there and shoots. Oh, you can. Maybe you're a guy that shoots weddings and you're always busy. But I'm talking about getting to that next level. So there's been a lot of careful selections in what I do, creating a brand and a style and concepts.
I think I've spent about a decade thinking about it, and it hasn't been till the last 2 years that I've been seriously involved in it. I mean, involved to the point of editing, capturing all the sound and motion, hands-on. I'm kind of a hands-on guy in that respect. So you want to talk about how Johnny came to me through Bruce?
Yeah.
Well, my friend Bruce McDonald. So I was sharing with Bruce my foray into the nonlinear portrait, and he was very intrigued, and he spoke to me about this fellow that he had photographed for a documentary about Yonge Street, the music scene on Yonge Street. And one of the people was Johnny Brower, this infamous rock star promoter in the 70s, late 60s, early in the 70s. And he suggested it might be a good idea to consider him as a subject for a nonlinear portrait. And so we invited Johnny to come into the studio. Over the course of, I think, 4 different sessions over a month, we had him come in and tell stories about his adventures in rock and roll. Out of that, I'm going to cut together a nonlinear portrait of this. I don't even know how to describe Johnny. He's quite a character. I've never met anybody quite like him, and you know, the stories he shares are worthy of being films in and of themselves.
Is that I will always, while I am alive, be creating, being a creative people, and searching for that next level of enlightenment.
Quite honestly, I think that we've got enough material to actually make an interesting documentary portrait of him, which I've not done to date, but it looks like that's how it's evolving at this point in time. Yeah, well, I mean, István.
How'd you discover him?
I met him in an art gallery. George Whiteside was having a show on Dundas Street, and István came to see a show, and George introduced us, and I just loved how this guy looks. I mean, you know, the silver teeth, the glasses, he looked like a homeless Bono. Huge personality, I mean, in a very quiet way.
Art is life, life is art, that's what I like to say. I consume more art than I eat food. Art is my real food, and that's how I get my energy, by making art, by looking at art, by talking about art, by living art. That's very, very important, yeah.
I mean, the more I learned about this guy, the more he fascinated me. I mean, he's known to have been kicked out of museums around the world for splashing blood on museum walls. I mean, he's infamous. And he's also won the Governor General's Prize for Art. So he's an accomplished guy, and he's a big thinker, and he's totally questions, you know, the way our society works, our beliefs. And so he's really an intriguing character.
And that's all I can say.
To me, editing now is what darkroom work used to be. I had the naive notion that this was just a skills upgrade. I would go and take a week-long workshop with Apple. I quickly realized that it is another career path. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Colin Mockery. I'm an improviser, actor, writer, layabout. Being an improviser, you learn quickly to give up control and just go along. Go along for the ride. Improv is so freeing, and when it works, it's because you've...
I wanted to show you this one. This is the newest one I just put on.
Improv are those bugs of comedy. They live, and then they're gone. When I've been on stage where it's gone horribly
I love wrong, this part.
You can actually hear the sweat coming out of your pores, and you can feel every drop going down your back. You feel like you're just so alive in that moment that you're dying. There's something spiritual about laughter. It boggles my mind that in this day and age, there's still wars. We're concerned about people of the same sex getting married. Marijuana isn't legal. The fact that we have numbered our world wars you know, you hope we stop at 2, but 2 is a pretty low number. I think we'll always strive to go a little higher. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope some super race of aliens comes down, gives them some pill that fixes our, rearranges our mind, and then we have a great life. But I am certain mankind would find a way to screw that up. And in a way, thank God, because it gives comedians work.